the job in a long-running dispute over pay and conditions. Travellers will face disruption to rail services on the 1st, the 5th and the 8th of October.
Yes, well, here to give us the details of all of this is travel expert Simon Calder. Great to have you in the studio, although I'm not sure I do want to see you here today because you're here to deliver some quite bad news.
Well, I'm afraid, yes, if you were hoping to travel this coming Saturday, well, the rail industry, all the train operators are saying, please don't try. There will be very, very little running. Only 1 in 9 trains is going to run. And the Rail Delivery Group, which represents all the train operators, have actually put out a statement saying, unlike in previous strike days, there is not going to be a service, for example, from London to Liverpool, to Manchester, to Glasgow, to Edinburgh, to Newcastle, to Norwich. And if you have got trains running, well, good luck. The timetables should now be in place. But it is going to be the biggest stoppage for 40 years. That's because you've got the RMT union going on strike, and the crucial thing about that, we can just see the General Secretary Mick Lynch there, is that they've got 5,000 signallers who work for Network Rail, and if they walk out, then half the network automatically closes down. The other half you can sort of run, but only between limited hours. And on top of that, train drivers belonging to the ASLEF union and working for over a dozen train operators are going on strike, and that is just wiping things out. So Saturday is going to be worst of all, but you mentioned the other dates, the 5th of October, that's purely ASLEF drivers working for a large number of train operators, including all the kind of really big ones, so Thameslink and Great Northern and Southern in the London area, South Eastern, South Western Railways, those are all kind of commuter services, but also LNER, cross country, Great Western Railway. It's going to be pretty awful then. And then on the 8th of October, it's only going to be the RMT union going on strike, but that will cut 80% of trains from the timetables.
I mean, does it look like there's any budging from either side in this dispute? Because it has been ongoing, but actually it seems like Liz Truss wants to clamp down harder on striking, so I don't know who's...
Well, I think there is a bit of room for optimism, oddly. Now, these strikes were originally going to be actually taking place earlier in September, but the sad death of Her Majesty the Queen meant they were immediately postponed. In that time, the new Transport Secretary, Anne-Marie Trevelyan, has met the leaders of both the RMT union, Mick Lynch, and the ASLEF union, Mick Whelan, for talks. Now, that simply wasn't happening with the previous Transport Secretary, Grant Shapps. And as a result of that, well, I think we are possibly going to get closer. And indeed, last Friday, when we suddenly found that there was all this cash available in the government's statement, which you've been covering ever since, I was actually quite optimistic that they find what's basically a couple of £1 million a year to make up for the shortfall in ticket revenue, because fewer people are travelling by train, and also to give the train drivers and all the other rail staff the increases they want to try to keep up with the accelerating cost of living.
Well, is there any good news in the horizon for travellers, especially by train? Because it does always seem to, every year, it just gets worse. You know, you have the conditions on trains. I mean, the train I was in this morning, it was 4 carriages instead of 8. It was packed. First class had to be declassified. People are grumpy. Their trains are late. They're expensive. I mean, will we ever get some good news?
Mercy, I'm sure you were never grumpy, but yes,
I'm a morning person, so...
Declassifying first class shows how bad things are, and of course, as you know, that just means they say, oh, crikey, we've got so many people, anybody can go into first class to try to relieve the pressure. Well, yeah, we have a lot of structural issues with the railways, things like, actually, HS2 are in time going to help, but at the moment it's a right old mess, and the crucial thing is that while people like you and me are always travelling by train, there's an awful lot of other people who do not regularly travel by train, who absolutely have to be persuaded that this is a really good way to get around in order to keep the system running, keep the fare money coming in. And at the moment, the rail industry is doing a pretty good impression of an industry which is not fit for purpose. So I do hope it gets sorted out soon so that the excellent rail workers are happy and, more to the point, rail passengers are happy too.